Hello, this is not my project, but I'm introducing it. This is Rebecca's grad school project. She's also made a lot of posters, and there's been some coloring, I think, as well. And so now this is a audio-visual accompaniment to a theoretical question where people were asked to like list
a population with which they were unfamiliar, and a issue pertaining to sexuality that was like cumbersome or scary.
and then those were jumbled as though by Michael Scott.
So what is to occur here is that we're going to talk about how we talk about this topic. Saudi Arabian individuals with brain injuries.
I didn't expect this.
Do we approach it head on? Do we approach it head below?
The easy response of laughing at this scenario is boring and just as culturally reductive as anything else.
So I'd like to talk about how what we talk about creates reality, or, to be Butlerian about it, how fiction creates a reality, or how the telling of the story creates a belief that that story ever was true, and the belief in that fake truth becomes a kind of real truth. If the story we are telling ourselves about ourselves is that we're radical rule breakers, we have to also allow for the other extreme, since extremes belie themselves, that we're also unwittingly conservative, rule-following American pawns who are being, good American bootstrap pulling up individualists who are questioning the question.
Right, or just does our compulsory deconstruction only reveal our class and educational background?
Yeah. But I take issue with the word only, because my thing with this whole project is to show that there's so many more ways of looking at questions, specifically this question, than just being like radical feminists. Tell me a little bit about Saudi Arabia.
Like, our Western concept of Saudi Arabia is that it's a literal theocracy. Like, people on the left here like to complain that we live in a theocratic patriarchy, but the Saudis kind of have a literally institutional theocratic patriarchy. But also, the government of the United States and the oil industry of the United States is closest ally.
That's a wonderful example of extremes belying themselves if we were to take, for example, Saudi Arabia and the U.S. as two halves of the same whole.
Yes, because while one claims to be a dogmatic theocracy, and the other claims to be a vibrant multicultural democracy, they've been really, really close allies militarily and economically for like 50 years. The ruling classes of the two countries, whatever they teach down to their subjects, the ruling classes are just ruling classes. They have a lot in common. That would be an easy explanation.
Yes, and that's why I agitate against it.
Right.
Because it's too easy. That's what we would, according to Bennett's developmental model of intercultural competence. I would claim that to be in part a minimizing view, halfway between ethnocentricity and ethnorelativity. Instead of defending against difference or adapting to difference without necessarily admiring it, you're just sort of saying it's all the same, which is in part a way of defending yourself against real difference.
And in part a doctrinal left point of view.
Yeah. And it can be multiple things. There's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
In answering this question about what Saudi Arabians with brain injuries, in regard to masturbation, what significance it has for the culture, our culture, all cultures, I want to remember that looking at like grand narratives created mostly by Westerners on cultural worldviews is not bad, and it can be balanced by looking at universal principles as delineated by whoever's making them, and personal idiosyncrasies, as well as intrapsychic or interpersonal weight. There's so many different frames for looking at stuff. Koltko-Rivera's model of worldviews enumerates multiple options for the dimensions of a group topic, such as human nature's morality, mutability, and complexity, being good or bad, changeable or not, simple or not. There's an interesting tension between respecting cultural specificity as well as allowing for, the psychological curiosity to, figure out what's not being said underneath the grand schema, and so like extremes are always belie themselves. You have to like place a premium on contradictions.
And so the other day, Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, went on TV and was talking about the youth of Iran, and he said that the youth of Iran will never be fully free until they can wear jeans and listen to Western music. And then the youth of Iran went on Twitter and tweeted at him pictures of themselves wearing jeans. We shouldn't assume that just because in our geopolitical view Saudi Arabia is an autocratic theocracy, we shouldn't assume that the people of a nation that we think of as oppressive are constantly oppressed, are oppressed in easily televised ways. Citizens of any country run the gamut of different attitudes to their own leaders and their own system.
Which is just the argument I was making. We can allow for cultural worldviews at the same time as personal idiosyncrasies. One doesn't want to take a paternalistic, exoticizing approach to this question. According to the research I've done and inferences based on koltko-rivera and Bennett's models, it can be assumed that Middle Eastern peoples perhaps have fatalistic worldviews, indirect communication, external loci of control. Perhaps they are collectivist and particularist in their evaluation of situations. According to Janice Turner in the Times of London, masturbation is discouraged among the youth in Arab countries. According to Jumana Haddad in the New York Times, who commends the French ban on the veil and publicly rejects the label feminist, Arab ladies should rebel. But, why are these voices the ones that are being heard in Western publications? Masturbation has a different tenor to Arabs who are Christian versus Muslim versus other religions. In terms of Arab Muslims, who are the majority of the residents in Saudi Arabia, the Quran doesn't mention masturbation. Interpretation, retrospectively, creates condemnation or condemnation. So ought we to condemn the way that it is handled by others? Who are the others? Are we creating the others? I mean, there are many ways to group people that are more significant in how they behave.
Grouping people by nationality is almost silly to me because there's so many other ways, and just in this, the way we keep talking about things, like we keep conflating Arab and Saudi, and we're talking about like a theocracy, but like the United States has lots of internal theocracies, like in Utah or in Brooklyn, and so do many other Western nations.
You were saying that it's unhelpful to group people just by how they behave, and I was saying that how people behave is based on like grand cultural beliefs that are passed down generation to generation, that are maybe based on lies, that are based on myths, that are based on a really good lesson that someone learned once and like aren't applicable anymore. Cultural worldviews are based on fictions, but also based on observation. But this is, it's like based on empirical evidence and research. But the problem with empirical evidence and research is you're only looking at what is, not what could be, not what is underneath it all.
And you're only looking at it through your own lens.
Exactly. Also, what is always deceptive. Like I go outside and I see like poverty and like cruelty.
Yeah.
If I'm like, oh, these people are fundamentally poor and mean. But research has bias. There's no such thing as objectivity. Operating within the idea of absolutes is unhelpful. According to HSED's cultural dimensions theory, Arab countries may be more hierarchical and collectivist. But as we've talked about, extremes belie themselves. So within nominal equality is hidden great inequality, precisely because of the official narrative, and perhaps vice versa. So Dan, what would you say a solution would be to how one talks about Saudi Arabian individuals with brain injuries on the topic of masturbation?
Well, one point of view that we've ignored this whole time is the point of view of Saudi Arabians with traumatic brain injuries who masturbate. And it's possibly a feature of our own myopic Westernism, maybe, if you believe in that. At least it's a feature of our, anthropologic distance that we have until now waited until saying we should talk to some Saudi Arabians.
But then another issue comes up, which is people have different communication styles. It might not be a topic which is able to be discussed. We may have different words for it. There might not be a word for it. I mean, there is. But I mean, stuff like that is cultural.
Right.
It is helpful to look at various concentric circles of ideas of how you talk about or think about people, one of them being cultural, another being personal, another being psychological, another being secret and unknown, another being, class-based, another being gender-based, etc., etc.
So the title of this thing is What We Talk About When We Talk About Saudi Arabians with Traumatic Brain Injuries Masturbating. So, any closing words you want to add? What we talk about when we talk about grad school. I can't remember the genealogy of the phrase what we talk about when we talk about, but,
Me neither.
it's probably stupid.
Yeah.
Probably, this reference is probably old and sucks. And I didn't need to go to grad school to learn about that. And ultimately, we can never truly know.
Yeah.
We can never truly know unless something terrible happens to us, the experiences of people with traumatic brain injuries. And we can never know the experiences of Saudi Arabians. But there is one thing that we can know.
And that...
we understand the worldview of those who masturbate.
We don't, though. We're not all masturbators. We understand the worldview of ourselves.
We are all masturbators, but we're not all masturbators. But we do know how to masturbate with words. Thanks. Good night.